Now let's pass to our Greek friend, to Yannis, which will talk about his point of view in this looking at future session.
Thank you, Andrea, and let me take advantage of having a bit more time today than yesterday as the last speaker, and to convey on behalf of the Hellenic Chamber of Shipping and also from the Union of the Greek Ship Owners, and in particular from John Liras, my chairman in the Foreign Affairs Committee, his great sadness at not being able to attend Francesco's conference, and his request that next year he is advised a bit of the date in advance so that he can coordinate with you, Francesco, his other duties, because it's very tough to decide between attending, environmental committees in other countries and coming here, but he clearly would prefer to have been here, and it would have saved me from having to be on all these panels as well. So anyway, thank you very much, and I hope next year we'll have some more of my colleagues here, Andrea. Now, turning to the things that we discussed a bit, and if you allow me, I'll go a bit backwards from the last to the first. Lorenzo's presentation was very thorough, very clear. It shows the intention, and when you have a vision and the direction, it's easier to find a backwind to take you there. So that's very important, as I think, as a managerial skill. As far as the sector is concerned, I think it's a very specific example, and it's very difficult to serve as a model for the rest of the industry, because it's much more protected and it's very geographically focused. To give an example of something close to your situation, in Greece, in the ROPAX business, where it's a bit more multi-directional and connecting many destinations, in the last 8 years, there has been a destruction of about almost 1 billion euros in money. And in Greece, in this sector, the ROPAX sector, which is servicing all the islands, the companies together, the three companies, have lost about 800 million to 1 billion. So it can be difficult, although they modernized, although they did many appropriate things, and although you had a Neapolitan captain at the helm of some of these companies who did maybe better than some of his competitors, still it was not so easy to have your success. So I think it's a combination of, you're handling it well, but also of being able to have the time to implement your strategy without being pressured by...
The main difference is that my company, it's a family company, and as Andrea was underlining before, family businesses, they usually can stay without profit for 1, 2, 3, 4 years. So
that's correct. You can sweat it out and keep the competition a bit at bay.
You invest instead of taking money off the company. You just invest.
Definitely. As far as Mr. Gavarone's, Giacomo's presentation, again, very interesting, very representative of what's going on in all the offshore markets. Luckily, in Greece, we don't have that many offshore supply or services companies. There are basically two groups, the Kalimanopoulos Toisa group, and now I'm forgetting who the other is, but we had some companies involved in the rigs that didn't do very well. They did, they had the same kind of trouble. They were also relying on Brazil. I think that, your industry is much closer to our industry, which is more cyclical. So this is likely that the values will come back, and if you have a young fleet, you'll probably be there to reap some benefit from this. One of the first companies I examined when I was in a merchant bank in London was a company called Sidlo, and they had offshore vessels in Aberdeen, in Scotland, and in order to diversify, instead of buying other ships, they had bought a plastic packaging company, because they figured that when the price of oil goes down, there's less exploring, but the margins, the plastic film industry, go up. So it was a very extreme case of counter diversification. In the end, I don't think it was very successful for them either, because they stayed quite small. But sometimes diversifying out of the industry can be a good idea. And finally, coming to Mr. D'Amato's presentation and his question mark, the rhetorical question, why is there so much silence? There's a good movie titled The Silence of the Lambs, you know, they just go there to be slaughtered without speaking. And in a way, I hear what Mr. D'Amato is saying, and I agree with him. And when people ask me what's going on in Greece, I say everybody is hiding in a corner, licking their wounds, they're not talking, they're putting on a brave face, and they're not really discussing enough where the trouble is and where the pressure is coming from. And I think this is a classic divide and conquer situation. I think it's a psychological warfare and manipulation from the banks, which are of course very few. There are very few capital providers in our business. Each of them has a huge book. And of course the last thing they want is for people within their book to coordinate their actions. And they impress upon owners that if they are the one to cause trouble, they will be treated worse. And everybody thinks and hopes, I think, in my opinion, a bit over-optimistically, that they will be the ones to get treated better. And I know that my grandfather would agree a lot with you. He was very much in favor of collective shipping behavior, and former chairman of the union, whose main drive was to bring together different parts, and that's why everybody could agree to have him as the chairman. I think that, you know, if the owners were a bit more collaborative and a bit more open, it's difficult in a non-differentiated market and a fragmented market like ours, but if they were, let's say, within each bank's book, able to get together and to put a united position against the bank, I think it would be a lot harder for the bank to pick and choose who to take out. You know, they take out one, then the other, no one complains. By then, there's no one left to protect you if you are the last one. And they're not really honorable institutions, these banks, much unlike the owners of whom they blame for being a bit not as careful as they ought to do. And I think it's strange because a lot of Greeks started with Williams and Glynn's back in the 70s. In the beginning of the enamorment of the financial services with a capital-intensive asset like shipping, and shipping embraced this tool, brought them into their way of thinking, used it, returned money every time, otherwise they would not still be there to do it. And then in the last 2 years to see, you know, this royal BS, which is an outgrowth of William and Glynn's, turning so viciously on its own former clients of multi-decades, is just a behavior that's unheard of and very uncommon in most type of transactions. And I think that everyone in Europe is in a state of shock when it comes to banks after the crisis, and we see, you know, the need for capital, and there's a numbness in society and in politics, but we are being crushed a bit under this numbness and this lack of response. And I think, you know, as was said earlier, the error in taking on a lot of easy money was ours. I think the error in not getting a bit together and not, you know, accepting some of the mistakes we've made and some of the vulnerabilities that we may have, it's really the biggest impediment in coming hard against the bank. Because in the end, the trouble in the bank's decision-making process right now is that it's politicians telling the bank what to do. And I have yet to meet a politician that is really in the mood for a real quarrel. Normally, a politician chooses the low-hanging fruit. And right now, they are just dictating the banks a behavior. And if this is slowly implemented and there is no pushback, then they will succeed. I think if there is a more concerted reaction, it will be very hard for the politicians to justify their policy, because there is some inherently wrong thinking in what they're doing. They claim that their banks should be supporting their local country shareholders, not shareholders, local country citizens, as the state is the shareholder, and they were bailed out by, you know, public money. But in reality, if you attack and destroy shipping, and if you remove any kind of capital that could replenish shipping, you are harming your societies, because you are taking away the lifeblood of the shipping cluster, which employs a lot of people in every single country. You take away, you know, the prospects for improvement, you take away a lot of strategic security, which is very important going forward in this increasingly multipolar and, agitated world. And you are also creating a vacuum into which you are inviting basically the Chinese to come in and to control the European fleet. And I mean, that is against any long-term interest of any state. So any state that has now nationalized the banks and is telling them what to do as if they were a post office should not only think immediately within the next 1 or 2 years, they should take a state-like view, look down 5, 10 years, imagine where they would like Europe to be. And I think Europe is currently transporting more than 50% or has more than 50% of the world's fleet. And that's an important strategic position. It's important for wars, it's important for trade, it's important for employment, it's important for technology. And just to kill it, to cure a balance sheet, which at the end, these banks, they owe hundreds of billions. Even our balance sheets of 3 or 7 billion, they're very small. So I think I must agree with Mr. D'Amato, and I hope that the Italians and the Greeks and maybe even the German owners can try and impress upon the regulators that Basel IV penalizing so heavily capital allocated to shipping is working against Europe. It's not working for Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Yannis. Your interventions are always very, very interesting. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
In each session and segments, you are a full, field player. You can play everywhere.